Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another niche focused video. And over the past weekend I got a chance to play with the Panasonic GH5s. Now I actually rented this camera to film a gig in Toronto as well as a family friend's bat mitzvah party. And while I was filming those two, I was like, hey, maybe I can squeeze out a review and really take a look at all of the footage and compare it to my main camera, the Blackmagic production 4K camera that came out in like 2012, 2013. So just to set this video up, my A-roll is being filmed on the Blackmagic 4K camera. Any footage you see of the Blackmagic camera was filmed on the GH5s, and any B-roll of the GH5s was taken on the Blackmagic camera. And one of the main reasons I wanted to rent this camera in the first place is I really wanted to see if it was something that may be worth trying to trade in my Blackmagic for, because so far mirrorless cameras, DSLRs, haven't convinced me to go. Kind of in my head, sometimes I almost see it as a step down from getting into the cinema camera market, only because of a few key things. See, things like form factor don't really bother me too much. I mean, form factor matters, but having a big heavy camera versus a light camera, I don't mind. I kind of like heftier stuff. I don't know why. Now, obviously the Panasonic is fantastic in small close quarters or super run and gun combinations. I find myself getting much more B-roll shots. I come back with a lot more footage rather than the Blackmagic. It takes so much time to set up, and you know, I have a new giant vest steady cam that takes forever to set up, and I get fatigued obviously a lot faster than carrying around the GH5s, even if it's on a smaller gimbal. So it was nice to play with something that is a lot smaller, but at the end of the day, I mostly care about the image. Like I mentioned before, there is a pretty significant, like almost 5-year age gap between these two cameras, so it's somewhat to be expected that the GH5s would automatically be better. But then I was like, the Blackmagic has actual raw output and a much higher bit rate, where the GH5s has a 400 megabits per second data rate. That's the highest one in the highest setting, and it only shoots at 24 frames. The Blackmagic has a 1.6 gig data speed. All specs on paper lead to the GH5 being better, but anytime I looked at sample footage comparing the two, when I've shot on the GH5 for, you know, a year when I was using that at work, there was always just something about my Blackmagic that I liked, and part of it is that data rate. There's just so much more color detail and detail preserved in each pixel. And then part of me also was thinking that it's the processing that occurs in the Panasonic codec. I mean, when you're outputting it, whether they add a little too much sharpening or I don't know, it still looks very video. And there's a lot of great LUTs and a lot of great people who have color graded and made it look amazing. But anytime I shot my Blackmagic, it wasn't necessarily like a classic film look. I'm not comparing it to like an RE or a Red or anything, but it definitely looked more cinematic to me. So that was the big thing here, is I'll throw up some sample footage from the Toronto gig and the party. Something like the 240 frames slow-mo was a lot better than expected. The raw footage looked very noisy, but as soon as you put a color grade, none of this footage has any denoiser on it. It just, you know, I threw down the shadows a bit and made it pretty contrasty, and it doesn't look bad at all for a Micro Four Thirds 240 full 1080 image. Of course, the 4K 60 looked great, and most of these scenes are pretty dark. The party scenes, I had a little LED on top of the camera, so that definitely helped a bit. That kind of brings me to my one gripe. I would have no concerns with my camera, and I wouldn't even be thinking about upgrading if it weren't for the fact that the Blackmagic cannot shoot anything above 30 frames a second, which is terrible. Like not even 60 frames in 1080. So over the years, any project, you know, if I did a fashion shoot or something, I would have no slow-mo options. I'd have to make sure it's on a gimbal or a steady cam and just do some camera trickery. It's really pushed me creatively, which is, you know, good, but it's also very nice to get into some of that slow-mo action that the GH5s has. So now let's get into the actual video quality comparing the two. I set both cameras right in front of my house, and what I did first was put it at f16. That was about the right exposure for the daylight. Oh, by the way, I used the Rokinon 35 T15 lens on this, as well as a ND with just one stop of ND filter on top of that lens on both cameras. Obviously the framing is slightly different because you have a micro four thirds as well as a Super 35, and the GH5s had the Metabones adapter on it. So yeah, the f16, I mean, both looked pretty good. Here's the RAWs of both. I will say I was very surprised at how flat the GH5 profile is. Of course, this is their Vlog, which is nice that it's fully pre-installed in the GH5s. You don't have to buy it on top of the actual camera like the GH5 you did. It's a lot flatter than the Blackmagic's footage, but again, Blackmagic, you have RAW, so going inside of DaVinci, I can actually control everything from ISO to white balance. So even though the colors looked pretty terrible off the bat, that's just because the white balance I had set to like indoor fluorescent or something, but I can change all that later, so I never really mind. So then what I did was I kept everything the same, and then I stopped down to f5.6. And this is where I was most shocked. Again, on the screen, and the GH5s screen is very hard to see in the light, so I believe I totally botched the focus on it, but really we're just looking at exposure for now. Since the log profile is so much flatter, it captured so much more detail, and I could tell that when I first dropped it in, but I really thought that RAW feature on the Blackmagic would really save the image, and it just didn't. That image looks terrible, and the GH5s 5.6 pretty usable. Like, that's totally fine. If you're really sad about the not having the details in the sky, I took the highlights all the way down. You could do an easy sky replacement to put that back in there. But yeah, the Blackmagic's is just terrible. Actually took the camera back out later to see if I accidentally set it to the wrong f-stop or anything, and nope. Just, yeah. And then just for kicks, I stopped them both down to the lowest T 1.5, which they both obviously are unusable. I lowered everything I tried to play with to get any sort of detail back, and the GH5 actually retained some detail in the darkest part of the image, in the shadow areas underneath the bushes and the trees, and the Blackmagic's pretty much has the little dot that was the sun peeking off of, bouncing off of a car. So yeah, both unusable, but I guess technically the GH5 retains some detail. And then slightly underexposed at f22, the lowest aperture that it will go. I didn't try going any more ND stops or anything. This one's kind of like the f16. Both were able to be recovered just fine. This is where it gets into that subjective area. I really like this shot on the GH5s. I think the color, again, the LUT, I know it's not totally correct, but I really like the look it gave it. And the Blackmagic took a lot more fiddling with the temperature and actually had to go into curves a little bit and adjust some things, and it's still not perfect. I didn't want to spend forever on that shot, so there's still some major color issues there, but exposure wise they both are easily recovered at f22. So yeah, where I'm at the end of this video is even more stuck. I could really use your guys' opinions down in the comments below. I know we always say that in videos, but this time I genuinely mean it. Because when I look at the footage, when the Blackmagic hits it, it still has that nice cinematic, more film-like look to it that just has to be due to the much higher bit rate and the RAW capability, so there's no post-processing in camera. But man, that GH5s, between the slow motion options, the versatility with everything, and man, it's a very good camera. And so it was a blast to use it. Please let me know what you guys think about the footage. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.